Back. Yesterday was International Day of Rural Women. The theme for International Day of Rural Women 2020, as designated by the United Nations, is building rural women's resilience in the wake of COVID-19. The National Movement of Rural Women has called on members of the public to be conscious of how their daily actions affect the quality of life of people in rural communities and how they can better support these residents. For more on the discussion, when I joined via Skype by Kefilwe Bopape, a social justice facilitator at the National Movement for Rural Women. A very good afternoon to you. Apologies for that, and thank you so very much for joining us on SABC News.
Hi, Flo. Thank you for having me. You're
most welcome. As a start, talk to us about the significance of International Day of Rural Women. I mean, especially on the backdrop as we also sort of celebrate World Food Day. I'm sure there are some significant inroads that rural women are making in terms of contributing to what we call food insecurity, particularly in African countries.
Yes, so for us, celebrating International Rural Women's Day is a very big deal. It's a moment where we can be able to pause as a movement and be able to see the work that we have done. As you mentioned, the issue of food security, the projects that we work with contribute a lot with agriculture. So you find that women in the rural are having small farming gardens that they're working on, and that is something that they basically rely on as a source of income that helps them to support their families. So in a day like this, we get to reflect on the contribution that we are making as a movement towards these organizations and to actually making sure that we capacitate activities that are in the rural places whereby these people struggle to get resources and sometimes even just have access to possibility of even acquiring funding or any other assistance that they may require. So for us to be able to reach out to communities that are then in the midst of a struggle, it's really something positive for us that we look forward to engaging with more communities and making sure that we support rural women in as much as we can.
Now, what are some of the unacknowledged challenges that rural women are facing that perhaps we're not really paying attention to, that can really help rural areas, particularly when we're talking about the issue of growing food, for example, which many rural women do anyway?
I think one of the challenges that we do overlook is the access of water.
Yeah.
In as much as rural women do have access to this water, for example, when you look at during lockdown, we were met with COVID-19 that caused most businesses to close down. So as a movement, we're really concerned about the fact that people do need healthy water to be able to still survive in their families. And as a means to meeting that, the movement made sure that they have water purifiers. And water still remains a challenge because most of them cannot access water to make sure that their productions are going well and to make sure that whatever business they're running, they actually can manage with water being available to them. So we still need much assistance in that. And I think also the issue of electricity comes into play in a sense that they do need access to electricity, not just to power their homes, but also businesses rely on that. So we are really very conscious in terms of analyzing the needs that they have in the rural communities and designing strategies that then assist us in meeting the needs that we see with the projects that come from the rural areas.
Yeah, and you talk about much assistance being needed. I wonder where can they access that sort of help? Surely it's also in the hands of government to assist rural women. But apart from that, how can us as residents in perhaps urban areas be able to contribute to maybe support women in rural areas, or rural women, as we're saying?
So as a movement, we pride ourselves in being a channel that is able to connect the government and other people who are able to help with the rural communities. Because we believe that it's important for us to be able to reach out to these people. So most of the conversations are held in urban areas, they are held in courts, they are held in organizations that can be able to negotiate what is happening. But most often we leave the people on the ground that we are trying to assist. So we believe it's important that people get in touch with the work that we are doing. That way we can be able to together have conversations with the very women that we are trying to help. One of the things that we do as a movement is to host workshops in the rural communities. We gather information as a social justice team, and that information we then take it to the rural areas where we educate the women and we help them to access these opportunities that are otherwise not available for them. One of the things that we can look at is the issue of transport. The government can make other resources available, but you find that they are not easily accessible to rural communities. So for them to travel from one point to accessing some resources that may be available through an organizational output or a government output placed somewhere is a challenge for them. So if we are able to then provide means of the information actually coming into the rural communities through people coming to do presentations, workshop, or bringing any aid that can come through, that is something that I think will add a positive impact on the lives and the project in the rural communities.
Yeah, you talk about the fact that these women might not have channels to speak, and the fact that conversations about them are largely held without them. You're talking about workshops, for example, but we've been sitting in a situation where we're dealing with COVID-19 lockdown and we can't really gather that much. What other platforms do rural women really have then to share some of their issues and their concerns and so forth? Because I also don't imagine that a lot of them would be having the tools that you and I are using currently at the moment, where we're able to kind of communicate, whether it is via Zoom, via Skype, all of that. So I'm just wondering how they're able then to kind of get communication through and across. And surely this is making the problem even more bigger, the fact that we're having to deal with COVID-19, where they can't go out in any case to meet up as rural women generally would in groups and so forth. So I wonder what other ways and other platforms are then being discussed or thought about in light of this.
So as a movement, we thought about creating a platform of having sort of print documents that can get to rural communities. So far, for the response of COVID-19, we managed to be able to provide a COVID relief fund to projects that we have as a way of sustaining them, in addition to the peripherals that we are providing. And with that, we also managed to produce pamphlets that we figured that was one way of also reaching to these women. So we also encourage them to use methods of writing, anything that they may have, to document it down, so that by the time we do meet with them, we have something to take away. Because we do understand, and it's an identified challenge that we have in that they don't have the resources that we have. Internet is a problem. Access to digital literacy on is something that we have identified. So we are looking at also reaching out to newspapers and any other means of communication. For example, also community radio stations. That is something we look into partnering with, because we know that somehow they have access to that. So that is something that we want to use to make sure that the conversations that we have do reach the rural communities, and they are also able to respond to us.
All right. Thank you so very much for giving us your time. Interesting indeed, this conversation, and maybe some issues that you highlighted that we might not have noticed in the past. Thank you for being with us, Kefilwe. We appreciate it.